During World War II, the rules were simple. Soldiers were issued one sidearm, if they were issued one at all. Anything else was forbidden. No personal pistols, no enemy weapons, no exceptions. On paper, enforcement was strict. By 1944, military police were confiscating thousands of illegal handguns every month. Punishments ranged from confiscation to court-martial. But war did not reward obedience. On the front lines, a pistol was not a regulation item. Soldiers kept sidearms that made them feel safer, quicker, or harder to kill. Some were taken off bodies. Others were traded, stolen, or quietly passed along. A few could mean instant execution if discovered. These are 7 World War II sidearm soldiers were never supposed to carry, and the reasons they kept them anyway. Number 7. Private-owned revolvers. When men enlisted in World War II, the rule was clear. You carried what the Army issued you, nothing else. Personal weapons were not allowed. Anything brought from home was supposed to be turned in or left behind. But thousands of soldiers ignored that rule. Many arrived at training camps with revolvers they had owned for years. Old Colt single-actions, Smith & Wesson revolvers, British Webleys passed down through families. These guns were not taken as trophies. They were taken because the men trusted them. That trust came from experience. Revolvers were simple, heavy steel frames, fixed sights, no magazines to lose, no slides to jam. If a round failed, you pulled the trigger again. For men who grew up hunting or working farms, that mattered more than fire rate or paperwork. Some of these revolvers were large 6-shot guns weighing close to 3 pounds. That weight soaked up recoil and made them easier to control under stress. Others were smaller 38 specials, lighter, easier to carry, and less likely to snag on gear. None of them was fast, but all of them were predictable. For some soldiers, the revolver was a family piece, a father's gun, a reminder of home. For others, it was comfort. The issued pistol felt unfamiliar. Their own gun did not. On paper, the Army hated this. Unauthorized weapons created problems. Ammunition could not be supplied. Repairs could not be guaranteed. If a soldier was killed with a non-issue gun, it raised questions no one wanted to answer. Military police were ordered to confiscate these pistols whenever they were found. By 1944, MPs were taking thousands of illegal sidearms every month, but the front lines did not care about paperwork. Officers often looked the other way, especially in rear units or support roles. As long as the weapon stayed hidden and caused no trouble, enforcement was uneven. In combat, the limits became obvious. Odd calibers ran dry quickly. No one carried spare ammo for a private revolver. In Europe, once the bullets were gone, the gun became a dead weight. In the Pacific, humidity rusted mechanisms that were never meant for jungle heat. Most privately owned revolvers never fired a shot in battle. Many were quietly discarded. Others were mailed home in pieces. A few stayed hidden until the war ended. They were never battlefield legends, but they mattered. They showed something the Army could not regulate. When men faced violence up close, they carried what they believed would work, even when the rules said they should not. Number 6. Modified issued pistols. Standard issue pistols were built to meet military standards, not personal taste. Triggers were heavy. Sights were fixed. Grips were plain. The goal was safety and uniformity, not comfort or speed. For many soldiers, that was good enough. For others, it was not. For example, the Wellrod Mark I pistol, which soldiers believed was only good till it was limited to clandestine operations, or even the inefficient and brutally slow 25 CP mouse guns the Germans carried. Thus, across every theater, men quietly changed their pistols. Triggers were smoothed. Pull weight was reduced. Sights were filed down or painted. Grips were wrapped in tape or reshaped by hand. Hammers were lightened. Safeties were altered. None of this was allowed. Military rules were strict. Issued weapons were not to be modified. If a pistol failed, the blame fell on the soldier. If an accident happened, punishment followed. If inspectors found a modified weapon, It could be taken on the spot. The reason was simple. The Army relied on standard weapons. Modifications added risk. A lighter trigger could fire by mistake. A changed spring could cause a jam. Commanders wanted control. But war pushed men to take chances. Soldiers with metal skills worked at night. Some used files. Others borrowed tools from repair shops. Occasionally, an armorer helped quietly. As long as the weapon still worked, officers sometimes allowed it, believing a confident soldier was a better one. The most common change was the trigger. Factory triggers were heavy by design. A smoother pull made accurate shots easier under stress. Sights were another target. Poor light made standard sights hard to see. Painting or filing helped. The danger was real. Bad work ruined pistols. Some modifications caused failures at the worst time. When that happened, there was no one to blame but the man who made the change. Still, many felt the risk was worth it. A pistol that felt right was faster, more natural, more trusted. In close combat, seconds mattered. And when survival came down to feel and instinct, soldiers chose function over rules. Modified pistols lived in the gray space between orders and reality, officially forbidden, quietly common, carried by men who believed the rules mattered less than staying alive. Number 5. Spanish Ruby Pistols. The Spanish Ruby pistol was never meant to be famous. It existed because France ran out of pistols during the First World War and needed something fast, cheap, and available. Spanish manufacturers filled that gap by producing nearly 1 million compact semi-automatic pistols, chambered in 32 ACP. They were small, light, and easy to conceal. They were also wildly inconsistent. Unlike standardized military pistols, Ruby production was scattered across dozens of workshops. Parts were often not interchangeable. Magazines from one pistol might not fit another. Tolerances varied from acceptable to dangerous. Some Ruby pistols ran smoothly. Others jammed constantly or discharged unpredictably. By World War II, their reputation was already poor. Despite that, thousands were still in circulation. Officers, resistance fighters, and soldiers who could not obtain an issued sidearm carried them anyway. The appeal was simple. The Ruby was flat, compact, and easy to hide under a coat or inside a pocket. In occupied Europe, concealment mattered more than firepower. The pistol held 8 or 9 rounds, depending on the variant. Its blowback action was simple but sensitive to dirt. Mud or grit could stop it cold. The safety was often unreliable, sometimes disengaging on its own. At close range, the 32 ACP cartridge could still kill, but it lacked stopping power and accuracy beyond a few meters. For Allied officers, carrying a Ruby was a quiet risk. It was not authorized. Inspections could result in confiscation. More importantly, if it failed during an emergency, there was no backup plan. For resistance fighters, the danger was far greater. Possession of any firearm meant execution. A Ruby discovered during a search was proof of armed resistance, and yet they carried them. Not because they were good, but because they existed. In many cases, the Ruby was the only pistol available. It was a weapon of last resort. It filled a gap when nothing else could. The Ruby did not earn trust. It earned tolerance. Men carried it knowing it might fail because going unarmed was worse. That calculation explains why such a flawed pistol survived into a second war, not as a choice, but as a necessity. Number 4. Walther P38. The Walther P38 was born out of necessity, not prestige. By the late 1920s, Germany understood that the Luger P08, while iconic, was too expensive and too slow to manufacture for modern war. Walther's answer was a pistol that could be produced faster, carried safer, and trusted under worse conditions. Adopted in 1938, the P38 introduced features that would quietly shape handgun design for decades. A double-action, single-action trigger, a decocking safety, an open-top slide, and a loaded chamber indicator that could be seen and felt in the dark. It was practical, durable, and built for mass war. During World War II, the P38 was produced by Walther, Mauser, and Spreewerk. eventually replacing the Luger as Germany's standard sidearm. Allied soldiers encountered it everywhere, on surrendered officers, fallen troops, and abandoned positions. And many immediately recognized something important. This pistol worked. It didn't require the precision tolerances of a Luger. It functioned in mud, snow, and sand. It could be carried with a round chambered safely. Compared to many issued Allied pistols, it felt modern. That was exactly why it was forbidden. Allied military regulations strictly banned the carrying of captured enemy weapons. Identification risks were the primary concern. A soldier carrying a German pistol could be mistaken for the enemy by his own unit. Ammunition was another issue. Non-standard calibers could not be reliably resupplied, and possession of enemy weapons outside intelligence channels could result in confiscation, reprimand, or court-martial. Despite this, soldiers carried P38s anyway. Some kept them as backup weapons alongside issued sidearms. Others replaced lost pistols with captured P38s out of necessity. Officers often looked the other way, especially when the alternative was a man going into combat unarmed. In the chaos of advancing fronts, enforcing weapons regulations became secondary to survival. Most P38s carried by Allied troops were never officially acknowledged. They were hidden in packs, tucked into spare holsters, or quietly mailed home after the war. The Walther P38 was never meant to serve Allied soldiers, but it did. Not because it was famous, but because it was reliable. And in war, reliability mattered more than rules. Number 3. Japanese Type 14 Nambu. In the Pacific Theater, enemy weapons were everywhere. Japanese positions were overrun, bunkers cleared, officers killed, and equipment abandoned. Among the most commonly encountered sidearms was the Type 14 Nambu, the standard pistol of the Imperial Japanese Army. Its appearance was unmistakable, and its association with the enemy made it immediately desirable and strictly forbidden. Allied regulations were clear. Captured enemy weapons were not to be carried or used. Doing so created serious identification risks. A soldier holding a Japanese pistol could be mistaken for the enemy in the confusion of jungle fighting. Worse, if captured by Japanese forces, possession of a Nambu could be interpreted as proof of mistreatment or execution of Japanese personnel. The consequences could be fatal. Still, thousands were taken. The Nambu itself was not an impressive combat pistol. It fired the underpowered 8x22mm cartridge, used a bolt-action mechanism with a short recoil-locked breech, and fed from an 8-round single-stack magazine. Early models featured a large winter trigger guard, later simplified to speed production. It had a manual safety and a magazine safety, though both were awkward to operate under stress. The pistol fouled easily in sand and humidity, and production quality declined badly later in the war. American soldiers didn't take the Nambu because it was good. They took it because it meant something. It was a trophy, proof of survival, proof of victory. Marines pulled them from officers' holsters and bunker floors. Some were dismantled and mailed home in pieces. Others were wrapped in cloth and hidden in packs. Officers occasionally confiscated them, but enforcement was inconsistent across island campaigns. Most soldiers never intended to fight with a Nambu. Ammunition was scarce, reliability questionable, and ergonomics unfamiliar. The pistol lived hidden, not holstered, but it traveled anyway, through jungles, onto ships, and eventually home. The Type 14 Nambu was never meant to be an Allied weapon, but by the end of the war, it had become one of the most commonly carried unauthorized pistols of the Pacific. Not because it worked, but because soldiers wanted a physical reminder that they had survived hell. Number 2. Wellrod. Some weapons were designed for combat. The Wellrod was designed for silence. Developed in 1942 by Britain's Special Operations Executive, the Wellrod was a suppressed bolt-action pistol built for assassination at point-blank range. It was not issued to regular troops. It was not logged like standard weapons. It carried no serial numbers, no manufacturer markings, and no national identifiers. If discovered, it was meant to leave no trace. Its design reflected its purpose. A simple steel tube housed the barrel and an integrated suppressor filled with rubber wipes and baffles. The bolt was manually operated, eliminating the sound of a cycling action. The detachable magazine doubled as the grip, coated in rubber for concealment. Available in .32 ACP and 9mm, it was accurate only at close range, because that was all it needed to be. Possession of a Wellrod was not just unauthorized, it was dangerous politically. If an Allied soldier was caught with one outside a sanctioned operation, it implied covert activity beyond the chain of command. Confiscation, interrogation, or court-martial followed. For resistance fighters in occupied Europe, the risk was far worse. A Wellrod found on a civilian was proof of organized resistance. Torture and execution were guaranteed. Despite this, some were kept. SOE operatives occasionally retained them after missions. Resistance fighters buried them instead of surrendering them. In rare cases, soldiers with access to restricted equipment took one, fully aware it was the most forbidden weapon they could carry. The Wellrod was never meant to be admired. It wasn't a trophy, it was a tool designed to disappear, used once, then destroyed or hidden forever. That some survived at all is proof of how badly people wanted control in a war where silence could mean life. Number 1. The Nagant M1895 revolver. The Soviet Nagant M1895 was already an outdated design when World War II began. Adopted in the late 19th century, it was a 7-shot revolver with a long, heavy trigger and slow reload. On paper, it had no place in a modern war. Yet it became one of the strangest and most restricted sidearms of the conflict. The reason was silence. Unlike other revolvers, the Nagant used a unique gas seal system. When the trigger was pulled, the cylinder moved forward, sealing the gap between the cylinder and the barrel. This prevented gas from escaping. As a result, the Nagant could be effectively suppressed, something almost no other revolver could do. That feature made it valuable and dangerous to possess. The Soviet NKVD issued suppressed Nagants to internal security units for executions and covert work. These revolvers were not meant for frontline troops. They were tools of control, interrogation, and quiet killing. When German forces captured them on the Eastern Front, they quickly realized what they had found. A revolver that could be silenced without complex modification was rare. Possession by German soldiers was unofficial and unauthorized. Using enemy weapons violated regulations, and carrying a suppressed revolver raised immediate suspicion. Despite this, Nagants spread. German intelligence units and rear area troops kept them as backup weapons. Resistance fighters in Eastern Europe valued them even more. A suppressed Nagant allowed a sentry to be eliminated without alerting a barracks or patrol nearby. For civilians, possession meant death. German occupation forces treated suppressed weapons as proof of partisan activity. Execution was immediate. For Allied forces, captured Nagants also circulated quietly. Soviet troops themselves often ignored regulations and kept older revolvers they trusted. Others took Nagants from NKVD stores or abandoned depots. Ammunition was uncommon, reloads were slow, and accuracy was poor. But silence mattered more than speed. A single quiet shot could change the outcome of an ambush. The Nagant was never admired. It was heavy, awkward, and unpleasant to shoot, but it filled a niche no other sidearm could. It existed in the space between battlefield weapon and execution tool. That made it forbidden, feared, and quietly carried anyway. In a war where noise could mean death, the Nagant's silence was worth every risk. War is full of rules, but soldiers didn't always follow them. From hidden revolvers to captured enemy pistols, these sidearms tell a story of survival, defiance, and personal choice. If you found these stories fascinating and want to discover more hidden histories of war, subscribe to our channel. Every video dives into the weapons, tactics, and secrets soldiers kept, no matter the risk.